Hello, I am Jamey from Stonemaier Games, and on today's Sunday Sit Down, I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite genres of games, which is racing games. Games where you are thematically and mechanically racing from start to finish, and yeah, that's it. That's the category of games. I'm sure you're familiar with this category of games. I'll start with my top 10, and then I'll talk about some honorable mentions and some games that I didn't consider for the list, but I could have if I had taken a slightly different slant, and a design discussion. But I'll get right to the top 10 list because I know some of you like to start out with that and then stop watching the video. So, my number 10 racing game is Flamme Rouge. I've only played a couple of these games once, and Flamme Rouge is one of those games that I played once. And the thing that I really like about Flamme Rouge, actually two things. One, you are controlling two different racers, so you have two bikers in the game that are racing through this track. And in Flamme Rouge, there's a drafting element to it, not drafting like passing something around the table, but drafting more in the racing style where you can benefit by being right behind somebody, which is a thematic element taken from actual bike racing, and I think that they incorporate that into the game well for Flamme Rouge, my number 10. My number 9 is Jamaica, and Jamaica is one that I think certainly could be higher on the list, but I've only played it once as well. Simply because I don't really have easy access to it. I don't think I know anyone who owns it, at least who currently lives in St. Louis. And in Jamaica, you are pirates that are racing around a big island, and you're gathering treasure along the way. And it has a couple really cool mechanisms in it. One of it is this dice mechanism that correlates to cards that you're playing on your turn. So you're going to, with the dice, if it's your turn, although all players will play a card on their turn. If it's your turn in Jamaica, you'll roll 2d6, and you'll put one as the day die and one as the night die, and they relate to two icons on the card you select. So you'll reveal a card, you'll choose a card from hand, and there's an icon on the left that represents your day action, and an icon on the right that represents your night action. And so if you have if the die shows a 2 on the day action, and you choose to move 2 spaces in the upper left of your card, or move spaces, then you'll move 2 spaces. So I like how the dice correlate to the cards that are being played, and only one player is choosing the die, while all players are choosing the cards that they're playing. I also like how the game ends with Jamaica, in that a player will cross the finish line to complete the circuit around the track, around the island, but and so they'll get the most points for how far for finishing first, and depending on where they finish. But other players can still finish that round and get points for where they finish. So it's not as the race doesn't end when someone finishes, and you get a certain number of points depending on how close you get to the player who actually finished, and even negative points if you don't cross the finish line at all, which I thought was clever. And also at the end of the game, your points aren't just who finished first, but your gold that you accumulated along the way plus your final scoring position. So some cool things about Jamaica, especially at the end game. That's my number 9. My number 8 was Snowtails. Snowtails is another one that probably could rise up on the list depending on the scenario, maybe a little bit. The one that we played at Geekway ran a little long, or ran really long, but I'm not sure how much of that was the players or scenario. I'm not quite sure. But in Snowtails, some really cool elements go into the decisions that you make regarding the two cards that are at the front of your sled. They represent the dogs that are pulling your sled, and you sometimes want them to be imbalanced, because if one number is higher than the other, then the sled will drift towards the imbalanced number, the higher number. If they're balanced, then you'll go straight. And you also have the decision to play cards as a braking mechanism to slow down your dog sled, which I think is really interesting, that you don't always and almost rarely want to go really fast in this game, because you'll run into obstacles, and that will hurt you if you run into too many obstacles, including the walls of the track itself, the sides. So I really like the interesting card decisions that go into how you are steering your sled and how fast you're moving in Snowtails, my number 8 game. My number 7, and sorry, I will have some visuals, but I don't have many at the bottom of this list. My number 7 is Pitch Car. Pitch Car is the only game on this list with a dexterity element. If you haven't played it, I'm sure you've seen it somewhere. Pitch Car is it's a big wooden track, and you're flicking these, I believe it's discs. It's been a while since I played, but you're flicking these discs around this track, trying to get as far as you can as the disc kind of carooms around the track, potentially knocking off other pieces, potentially knocking out your own piece. And in Pitch Car, I really like the creativity that comes from building the track itself. You can have a lot of fun from just building the track. But I also like the dexterity element. I think that can add a lot of fun and stand-up moments to the game of Pitch Car. A lot of chaos, too. That's my number 7. My number 5 is The Quest for El Dorado. This is a really creative deck-building racing game where you are playing cards kind of in deck-building style, where you're playing cards that indicate your movement, and you're moving through this grid. I'd recommend looking at a video of this because the visual of it is really cool. And the thing that I really remember about El Dorado that I really enjoyed was how it mixed classic deck building elements into various spaces on the map itself while keeping the intent of the first player to finish wins. So if I'm remembering that correctly, I believe it's a pure race where you're just trying to finish. And so everything you do is trying to get to that end, but the decisions you make during the game, like the routes that you take, the cards that you play, the cards that you gain even, impact how you're able to complete the race. And my favorite thing, my most memorable element of that was that to trash cards, there's certain spaces on this hex grid that you're meandering through that you have to go a little bit out of the way to get to. But by trashing a card early on in the race, you might give yourself a significant boost later in the race. So I really like that decision of actually going to a specific place to trash a card. It's not something you can always do. You have to go out of your way to do it. And you kind of have to guess, will this benefit me in the end, in the long run? That is The Quest for El Dorado, my number 6. I'm sorry, I think I said number 5. My number 5 is The Hare and the Tortoise, and finally one that I have here. And this is the first, I think, game that I've mentioned on this list so far where you are not a specific character. You are influencing all 5 of the different characters in this race. You can kind of see them on the back of the board here. And so I really like this idea in several of these racing games that I'm about to mention where you are not a specific character. You are influencing a bunch of different characters. At different times, you might be rooting for one over the other. And in this game specifically, you choose at the beginning of the game one character that you want to win, and then you choose another one randomly. So you have a set of cards where you're definitely choosing one, and then you could choose the same one from a set of random cards. You could choose a different one. And it's secret, so you don't know if the cards that you or the characters you chose to support during the race are the same as those that other players are supporting during the race. So I really like that secrecy that happens where you might suspect that someone is supporting one character, but really maybe they're supporting 2 different characters, and that just happens to be one of them. And also the card play of the game, I won't go into how the rules work, but the card play of the game obfuscates those details really, really well in The Hare and the Tortoise. So yeah, I really like the secrecy that goes into the character selection in this game, and how there's a distinct possibility that you will be supporting more than one character. That's The Hare and the Tortoise, my number 5. My number 4, where's number 4? Here we go. Cosmic Run Rapid Fire is my number 4. This is a 2-player game. You can kind of see it back here, where you are racing to get to 3 different planets. That's the primary way to win. So you're moving up these tracks to get to 3 different planets, and you add up some points at the end to determine the winner. But generally, you get so many points from reaching those planets that is a pretty darn good way to win. This is a 2-player dice drafting roll and write game, and it is a lot of fun. I've just had a ton of fun playing this game. It was really easy to learn. It's really easy to just get to the table and play. And let me think if I have a favorite mechanism in it. I know I've done a video about it. I think part of it, I don't remember exactly what I said in my original video, but I really like the different paths that you create during the game. I think this is what I talked about, in that you start off with a completely clear path, as you can see. You start off at the bottom here and have to work your way through. But as you roll these dice, the dice will create obstacles in these paths. So you're kind of creating obstacles that you don't know about as you play the game. And so you're both mitigating your risk as you play. You're making decisions about those obstacles because you influence where those obstacles go on the tracks, so that you can navigate through them. And you're trying to race to these planets so that you don't have to deal with the obstacles. So I really like that you start off with a blank slate and discover those obstacles through player choices and a little bit of chaos throughout the game in Cosmic Run Rapid Fire, my number 4 game. My number 3 game is Camel Up. Camel Up, yeah, Camel Up. I used to have in my collection. I got rid of it after I played the new one because the new one is really nice and I haven't replaced it. But in Camel Up, again, you are not represented by a camel in the race. You rather are rooting for different camels throughout the game and throughout each round. Each round consists of moving each camel one time of its own accord. And you can bet on different camels during the round. You can also bet on, and this is really cool about Camel Up, you can bet on a camel to finish the race, finish the entire race first with a face-down secret bet. And you can also bet on a camel to finish last with a face-down secret bet. So I like that your alliances are split throughout the game, and you can bet on more than one camel for either of those things. So I might bet for both the green and the red camel to win the race, and the blue and the yellow camel to lose the race. And hopefully I'll get one of those right, but I'll have used turns during the game to do that, to place those bets on those camels. So by hedging your bets, you lose turns that you could have spent doing other things to accumulate more money during the game. It all comes down to money or the points in the game. And Camel Up also has some really cool chaotic elements where camels can carry each other in the race. So one camel might end up on top of another camel, and that bottom camel if it moves, it'll carry that other camel forwards or even backwards if you use the newest version of the game. Which adds just some really, really interesting elements to the game, that camels can actually influence each other. They're carrying each other. It's a really cool game. I highly recommend checking out the video because there are really a lot of interesting race mechanisms in this game, or racing game mechanisms, in Camel Up, my number 3. My number 2 racing game, one of my favorite games ever, is Downforce. Downforce is a game where you are racing to the finish. You're trying to have your car finish first. But throughout the game, you're also going to be placing bets, or not even really placing bets, but claiming other cars as the cars that you think will win the race. And so in Downforce, you're not always necessarily rooting for your own car to finish first. You might have heavy bets on another car that you place during the game for them to finish first, and that can even bring you the victory if you do that. And that's tied to my favorite mechanism in the game, which leads to some really interesting player interactions, in that the cards that you play, and I'll pull one out while I'm talking about it, the cards that you play on your turn, or you'll play one card on your turn, often end up moving other players just as much as it moves your own car. So let's get a good example here. So say I have this card to play, or I choose to play this card. I must try to move the orange car first 6 spaces, then I must try to move the green car 4 spaces, and I must try to move the blue car 2 spaces, then the yellow car 1 space, in that order. And I say try to because part of the game is manipulating these cards and manipulating the cars and playing these cards at times where you benefit yourself the most. So for example, say I'm green and I have this card, but orange is currently blocked. It can only move, say, 1 space. That would be a great time to play this card because orange only has to move 1 space, and then I can maybe get the full benefit from moving 4 spaces for green, my car, or a car that I'm betting on. Also, at the same time, there might be times in the game where I am stuck, where I cannot move, my car cannot move, or the car I'm betting on cannot move, and I need to play a card like this to maybe get the orange car to clear out of the way of my car to get it to move, so that my car, the green car, can actually then move. And so it creates, I don't necessarily want to say positive player interactions, but it's just on any given turn in the game, your car could be moving thanks to decisions made by another player, or your car may not be moving. So it leads to like agonizing moments and hopeful moments where other people are helping you even though you're not actually doing anything. So that I really, really love that about Downforce, and I love that there's so much agency in the game. It's not a die rolling game. You are making decisions on your turn that you have pretty much full agency over. It's just on the other turns that you don't have control over it, but positive things are still happening. At worst, you're not moving backwards. There's a best case scenario where you are moving a bunch of spaces, and worst case, you're just not moving on other players' turns. That is Downforce, my number 2. if you follow this channel a lot, you may have thought that that was going to be my number one, but my number one is not a tabletop game, because I didn't say this was going to be a tabletop racing game list. This is overall game racing list, and my number one favorite racing game of all time is Mario Kart 64. This is a game where I played a Grand Prix of this game probably every day in my senior year of college. We played a lot of Mario Kart 64, and I just had a blast with this game. It's just so much fun. I love, and I think the reason why I love it over other versions of Mario Kart, because there are many other versions that look much better at this point, is that my control of the kart felt really like I had very, very precise controls of what the kart was doing and how it interacted with the world around it. I also, even though I'm sure there's some controversy about this, I really enjoyed the catch-up mechanism in this game. I like that if you fall way behind, the items, or the probability of getting items that help you boost back up to the front goes way up when you grab those items, those question boxes. So this is a classic problem that I'll lead this into the design discussion. But in a racing game, there is a possibility of falling way behind. And so you either have to decide, am I going to have a catch-up mechanism, or am I going to use mechanisms where you aren't necessarily, where all of your hopes aren't dependent on one vehicle. So maybe in some of these games, like, you don't actually represent just one vehicle. You're betting on other vehicles. You're betting on vehicles at different times. But in Mario Kart, it's a game where you only control one vehicle. You're not betting on other cars, and so it does have a very specific catch-up mechanism in those items that you get. And I really like how it does that. I think it works really, really well. And it makes the game really fun and tense until the end of the game, unless you have someone who's really bad or really good, or someone who gets one of those shortcuts. But the shortcuts are awesome. I don't think I've seen... Actually, El Dorado does kind of have some shortcuts, some risky shortcuts. That's probably the best attempt I've seen at a game that has shortcuts. I'm looking at this list. Snowtails kind of does. Downforce does, but they're not like secret shortcuts. There's no risk to them. It's just if you can get to the shortcut, you're taking it. But I like the secrecy of the shortcuts and the difficulty of actually getting them in Mario Kart 64. So yeah, that's my number one racing game, Mario Kart 64. And to lead that into the design discussion, there are a couple different things that I want to mention here. One is that element of the catch-up mechanism. One I didn't even think of was that the secrecy element of secret shortcuts that are difficult to pull off in the moment. I'd love to see more racing games with that. And if you can think of any examples, I'd love to hear those examples. In fact, I'm going to write that down because I think that's a cool idea. Secret passages or shortcuts. There are no cooperative games on this list, which surprised me a little bit. A cooperative racing game, and I don't exactly know why that is. I think many cooperative games you are racing against like the clock, but you're not like literally racing against an AI, a bad guy, an antagonist. And I did think there's one example of this that would either work as a cooperative game or could work as a cooperative game or one versus many game. And that is, and this is an example of a game. It's an idea that maybe you can run with. I don't think I'll pursue this. But the movie Mad Max, and this is kind of a variant even on the movie Mad Max, Fury Road. I love that pretty much the entire movie is a chase scene. It is a race that involves a chase. And I love that. I love the tension of the chase in Mad Max. I think that could translate really well to a game that's not just a race, but also a chase, where if the bad guy actually catches up with you, you lose. And it could also be interesting, especially in a one versus many game, kind of similar to Mad Max, but a little bit different, and that the game might have two halves, where the first half, if the antagonist catches you, you lose. In the second half, though, if you get to a certain point and the antagonist hasn't caught you, you turn around and you are trying to catch the antagonist, and that's how you win if you catch the antagonist in the second half of the race. Just a random idea. I don't know if that would work at all, but I love the idea of the chase. I think the chase is something that makes racing games a lot of fun because you are chasing other players. But if the stakes are the chase itself. That if you catch another player, you win. That could bring it over to a one versus many game or a cooperative game. I almost thought of Scotland Yard for this, but Scotland Yard, you are chasing around, but because of the secrecy of it, the hidden information in Scotland Yard, I don't know if it quite functions as a chase or a race game. Some other concepts that I've seen in other games are games like Space Base, Euphoria, and Rouge the Ganges, where they aren't race games at all, thematically, but mechanically you are racing to be the first player to trigger something, and that is the end of the game. This ties into my recent endgame discussion list, and games that don't use victory points. So in Euphoria, you're trying to get 10 stars. If you get 10 stars, you end the game and you win. There's a tiebreaker. Other players get one more turn. Space Base, you're trying to get to the first to be get to 40 points, I believe. And Rouge the Ganges, where you were trying to have your fame. Actually, I do have that on the shelf. I should have shown that one. In Rouge, you're trying to have your fame and your money intersect. And if you're the first player to do that, you win. And another similar game in that vein over here, I do have Euphoria here. So Euphoria is the example there of racing to get to a certain point, and that ends the game. And then there is the game where you are, here's Clank. Kind of the Clank example here is that you are racing thematically to get somewhere, and that matters in the game. So in Clank, you're trying to race down into the dungeon, and there's race out of the dungeon. And so there is a kind of a spatial element there of racing to get out. Clank it doesn't matter if you are the first player to get out in Clank. It impacts the game, but in points-wise, it doesn't matter. Whereas in some other games, in many other games really, there are races to get achievements. So you're trying to be the first player to do something. Terraforming Mars has it. Scoville has it, where you get more points if you're the first player to race to achieve something. Again, I didn't think that was fair to include in a racing games list, but that is a type of race that you can include in a game if you're looking to include that type of tension in a racing game. And then I do have a few honorable mentions, kind of. The first racing game I ever played was First to Reverse when I was really, really young. And First to Reverse, you were actually kind of that Mad Max idea where you're racing to get to the end of the track, and then you're racing to get back to the start. And you're rolling. The cool thing about First to Reverse is that you're rolling different types of dice. The dice are numbered differently, and that ties into how far you have to go in the race. So it's a good simple math game, I think, for kids to figure out how do these odds work, and is the game even balanced based on those odds. I haven't played Formula D or Formula D, which I think does give players different dice with different gears to use. I've heard that's a lot of fun. I need to try that. I played Winner's Circle. And I remember enjoying it, but I don't remember enough about it to even put it on this list. And Gravwell I thought was really, really ambitious, really, really interesting. I'm sure it'll be on some of your lists, but I found it really hard to grok. It's a weird game where you're manipulating gravity. Very, very clever game, but it was a hard one for me to get my mind around. So yeah, that's my top 10 list. Some thoughts about race game designs. And I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you have any general thoughts about the games that I mentioned, about designing racing games and what's good about racing games, what's bad about racing games, and maybe your top 3, your top 5, or even your top 10 if you have a top 10 racing games list. That's it for my list today. I look forward to hearing your comments below, and I will see you on Tuesday for my board game, My Favorite Mechanism video. Take care. Bye.